Hello, welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm Joshua Solomon. I'm usually here with Gary Hopper, but he is out on an international peacekeeping mission at the moment. He's keeping peace with his wife because she, after 40 years, has not thrown him out yet. So congratulations to them. And Brenda, make sure you get him back over the border before he causes an international incident. We're here with Victoria Sullivan. She is running for mayor of Manchester.
That is right.
Victoria, we know what happens when urban areas are besieged by Democrat controllers. Detroit, Chicago, San Francisco, Baltimore.
Manchester.
So how do we prevent that from happening to Manchester?
Just for the folks that don't know me, I'm Victoria Sullivan, and I was a two-term state rep. I served in the House Education Committee. I was also an assistant majority leader, and I am running because our city has taken a swift and detrimental turn, and I decided I wanted to get in and be part of the solution. I'm raising my two children here. They're 12 and 14. We live on the south side with my husband, and we're working really hard to meet with people all around the city to talk about how we can work together as a community and turn the city around. So, as we know, we've seen the homeless situation has really impacted the downtown area. We've got businesses
It's
that
starting to be more visible, too.
It is
more visible than it's been in the last 10 years.
I met with some business leaders just maybe 6 weeks ago. I want to say, and by then they were down 3% for the year already. And that's only increased over the last few weeks. I think there was a little hiatus when the weather broke and they started to feel like it wasn't so much downtown. It went to the situation was sort of moved to the parks. But now they're saying it's settling back downtown again, which is actually sooner than I thought, because I thought it would be more towards the fall and the winter time that they came back in. So what originally happened was we've always had homeless in the city, right? It's a city.
Right.
But we had people that were in camps in different areas, and we had organizations that worked with them to make sure like they knew the populations of people that were sort of in between places that they could work with and help get employment and lift them up and out. And they knew the people that, because there's always a population of people that they do not want to live in what we consider normal society, right? They want to live where they're at and off the grid.
We've seen stories of folks on the riverbanks who did not want to move from where they were.
And we had people that were down there, different organizations that were caring for those people. They knew them. They had built relationships with them. They knew who needed medical treatment. They knew they knew the people and worked with them. We had organizations that were giving them food supplies so that some people don't want to go and get their food every day at the shelters. Mm-hmm. So they were packaging food that they would have that didn't spoil, that they had for long periods of time. When the mayor called for the highway department to go down and destroy the camps, they destroyed the tents that were given to them by organizations like Liberty House and warm clothes and boots and their food.
So city officials destroyed tents that were given to and paid for by these organizations?
And the food stores that they were given to, it was all destroyed. I was told by more than one person in more than one organization that they actually filled the dumpsters right in front of these people as they sort of destroyed where they were living. So that forced them to be other places in the city. And because it was fall, they immediately sought shelter in the doorways of the businesses downtown because it's warm, there's food, there's money, there's people, right?
And hence the visibility.
Right. So that's sort of how we got here. And now, as you've seen, that the shelters, there was an article the other day, the food shelters are actually feeding 300% more people than they were a year ago. We know that the opioid deaths are up 17% over last year. When Nashua has a decrease in opioid deaths, we're actually increasing. So I was watching, there was a piece on MUR tonight that they actually interviewed me earlier in the day, and they actually had the mayor on as well. And she said she wants to continue. They've got great momentum going, and she wants to continue her work for another 2 years. Well, the momentum that I am seeing is not in a positive direction at all.
Right.
We don't want to see continuation of more homeless, more deaths, more crime.
Now, you mentioned the opioid crisis. I was under the understanding that statewide we're coming down. And the numbers in Manchester are going up?
Yes.
That's interesting.
So it means that around the state, we're doing, a good job getting a handle on it. In the city, we're not. So what are we doing here that's different, right? So
So you said that the mayor had sent the city officials out
Yeah.
there to do that. Under what authority? I mean, what? I mean, I understand it's city property, but it had been being used by the homeless for so long. What changed to make that the priority?
I'm not sure. I just know that by disrupting where they were living, there was no plan. There wasn't a plan. There was just destroy the camps. There wasn't, okay, we need to talk to these people, get them moved to someplace else, give them shelter somewhere else, form some solution for them. None of that happened. So it became the problem of the people living in the city, the taxpayers, the people in the businesses. I was talking to someone just the other day that has a property down here where they're trying to rent out part of it. And I don't know if it was residential condos or office condos, but he said when the realtors come, like they can't get anyone to rent down here right now because they're stepping over homeless people. He said literally over homeless people in our doorway to get inside to see the area that they want to rent out.
And so that's affecting business.
Yeah, the restaurants downtown. I mean, there was someone that posted that they were eating and someone urinated in the street right in front of them. I did a ride along with the police, and one of the stops that we went to was right in front of one of the downtown restaurants. And I'm not going to say their name because they brought it to my attention that when we say their name, even though the incident happened outside of there, it actually harms their business because
Right.
I think it's not a good area. So it happened right in front of their restaurant, but it was a beautiful Friday night and people were outside eating and someone overdosed right in front of families that were eating outside and like turned blue overdose, like gone, and had to be brought back with Narcan. So they're eating dinner and there's 2 cruisers that show up, officers on bikes, the ambulance, the fire truck, and these people are just trying to enjoy their dinner. And someone down there actually remarked, like, this is why people don't want to come to Manchester anymore. Like, this is why.
Okay.
So for someone who lives here and pays taxes here and is trying to raise a family here, this is not what you want people to think of as your city. This doesn't make you have confidence in, where you're bringing your kids up. And when you say to people you live in Manchester, they sort of give you that, like, well, why? Why would you live there? And we want to, work with the community to turn things around so we can all be proud of where we live.
Now you're from Manchester? Or?
I grew up in Massachusetts, but my husband and I chose our home here in Manchester over a decade ago. And we did so because I grew up in a really small town. And really small. We had to travel outside of town to get most anything.
Right.
And the convenience of the city was something that, I loved, but it had so much opportunity for our kids. Like they had sports from the time they were 4 years old. They had city sports. And I volunteered for all of their sports. I started a drama club at their elementary school and I ran it for 7 years. We did 2 musicals a year for 7 years with kids, grades 1 through 5. And we invested back in the community that we loved so much. And, that's why we wanted to move here, because the city had so much to offer. And I feel like people are leaving because it can no longer offer those same things.
Right. And you've previously represented this area.
Yep.
Yep.
The Hillsborough District 16, which is Ward 9 on the south side.
Okay. So what other issues are important to you? I mean, we've talked about the homeless. We've talked a little bit about the opioid crisis. That one is one that there are multiple ways to attack it, and some of them work and some of them don't. But
and that's,
there are other issues.
Yep, and
taxes.
When I was a legislator, I actually had put in a bill that was directed toward the opioid epidemic and getting people more help where they were at. But it also had a provision in there that if we had people from outside the city that came in to seek assistance, like at safe stations, we could bill their town where they have their residents. And that did not pass in committee. We've heard a lot of like Joe Kelly Lavasser and other aldermen speak up about what much of a burden this is placing on our city now. Over half of the population that comes here to use safe stations is not from Manchester.
Right. And yet Manchester taxpayers, we're paying for that Narcan. We're paying for that emergency vehicle to show up with.
And as I said,
people.
when that man overdosed, there were a lot of resources that were being used, right? It was an ambulance, a fire truck, 2 cruisers. I mean, there were a lot of resources being used there that we can't use in other areas if there's another, emergency where they need people. But recently, the current mayor was speaking about how, this is impacting our city because we're having so many people from out of town come here. But when that bill was in, she never came to testify on behalf of it. She never said, Manchester really needs this bill because we have the burden of all of this. It's impacting us all. So I think a lot of what she does is a little too late. Like, that was something that if the city had supported, I think we could have gotten that through and it would have eased our burden here. But it also would have spread out. It would have given the opportunity for other areas to do something similar to a safe station wherever they could do it. Because, up north, some places don't have a fire department to do safe station, but they have a community center or a church and they could do it there, right? So it would have allowed more places to do it than just the city. And it didn't make them. It just allowed them to do it. So some of the solutions that I've brought forward that had they been supported by this mayor of the city, I think would have helped us along the way. But now we're in a situation where we need to just start working as a community to pull everything back. We've got so many good people that want to do good work in our city, and some of them are doing it, but they're all in little pockets around the city. Bringing everybody together, the nonprofits, the faith-based groups, the police, and having real conversations about what is working and how we can strengthen those programs. Those solutions will actually impact the rest of the state. If we are stronger Manchester, it's going to make the rest of the state stronger too.
Right. So tell me about your ride-along.
Oh,
Was that a good time? Was it a bad time? Was it a
I told my kids I got to wear the Kevlar corset because, I had the bulletproof
Oh, you had to wear the
vest on, yeah. They actually let me get out of the car and follow them. Well, the officer that I was with was much taller than I was, so keeping up with him was a little difficult. And I had heels on. I wear heels everywhere, so he did not. But yeah, it was an eye-opener. And I chose to go on a night that I thought would be busier. I chose a Friday night. And like I said, it was a beautiful night. And we saw that gentleman who overdosed. And they did bring him back. They Narcaned him. They brought him back. But he was not happy about being helped. He didn't want to be helped.
And they usually aren't. I mean, the Narcan is, if you've ever witnessed it, my only personal experience is watching it on live PD, watching it live. Someone who's passed out, they give them that shot, and it's miracle, but it's expensive.
And he had been Narcaned previously, just a couple days before,
Well,
and they said, we're probably going to Narcan him again.
That's where I personally get upset.
Right.
Someone who's been Narcaned 4 or 5 times on my dime, I understand they have an issue. I understand that, but after 2, 3, why isn't the system finding help for this person?
And this is where legislation is like the devil's in the details, right? Everybody thought that the Narcan bill was a great piece of legislation, and some of us
it's become a crutch.
Well, some of us advocated for some kind of follow-up care. So if you're Narcaned, you would receive care. You would receive help getting into a rehab. You would receive some kind of follow-up care and, be held accountable in some way.
Right.
The way that it was passed, there's none of that. They cannot ask you your name. You do not have to go to the hospital. They can just release you right there back onto the street.
And that's kind of the irony of this Narcan business is if I'm sitting there and I'm a half an inch away from injecting this heroin or fentanyl into my arm, and I'm witnessed by a police officer, I'm going to jail for possession. I'm going to jail for, depending on how many needles I have on me, how many packets I have on me, I'm going to jail for distribution, right? The instant that needle goes into my arm, you can't ask me any questions. You're not charging me with anything. All you're doing is Narcanning me and putting me back out on the street to continue.
And the intention was because people didn't want other people to hesitate to call for help if somebody needed it. But the result is they have Narcan parties where they have a lot of people come together to do
there
drugs
are some municipalities
and have
that
one
pass
person
it out
that is
teach
there
you how to
that's
use it
sober
if you
enough.
need it. Yeah, exactly. And it becomes a crutch.
Right. And the other part is there are consequences to Narcan, right? You are not breathing. Your heart has stopped. That impacts your brain. Right? So if you're Narcaned 4 or 5 times, like there is an impact that's life lasting,
Hence the need
and
for that follow up.
But there is no follow up care,
and for the infrastructure to put in there, and for a mayor to go to the legislature and
Right.
testify for
And
something
that is
like
really
this
one of my
when a
strengths
bill comes through.
as a legislator, former
Right.
legislator, right? I know how to work with the legislator. As I work with Chris Sununu really well. We had one of the problems that we have on our streets is the crime, and there was a bill that was put in that repealed part of the bail. So it used to be set up that if it was a cash bail system, but this bill, well-intentioned, went in and would say, like, if you're poor, if you're a drug addict, if you're homeless, like, you can't be held accountable because you don't have money for bail. So how can we help you out? So you would be released on personal recognizance. What happened was nobody was held, right? So that turned into a catch and release program. So it went from saying, like, well, if somebody needs more help, we'll give it to them too. If they have any of these things, we're just not going to ask them for money. They're just back on the street, right? So I worked with the legislation this year when we saw the effects that it really had. And I spoke with someone that I used to serve with. Oh, John Burt. You know John Burt, right? He serves on the Criminal Justice Committee. So I spoke with him to see where the bill was at. I spoke with Dick Hinch, who's the minority leader, to make sure that this bill was going to go through. I asked what I needed to do to help it along. Like, this was really important for my city because the cops were arresting people and they were back on the street the next day. Like, and it was happening repeatedly. Yeah. The shootout that we had on South Willow Street at that hotel?
Absolutely.
Did you read the article about
I
how many times
drove
that guy has
as
been
that was
released?
happening. Yeah.
He had been released over and over and over again, never showed up for court appearances when he was supposed to. So there were, again, no accountability, no repercussions for not obeying the law. And I met with Governor Sununu and I said, this is really important for my city. Like, this is really hurting us. Can you help us? And he said, I will definitely sign it into law. And I know it's been signed into law now. Part of it is in effect. The rest of it goes into effect in a couple of months. And it's something I'll be watching really closely to see if it has the impact that we need it to have so that our officers are not arresting the same people daily, and it frees up their time to actually pursue other things that they need to.
And that is a problem.
It's a
and
huge
we see
problem.
that where officers actually develop a relationship with somebody that's based on arresting them repeatedly. Oh, we know this person. Mm-hmm. So, or officer so-and-so has been to their house 6 times. Let's send them, that way they don't feel threatened.
Yeah,
right? And when you have a society whose relationship with law enforcement exists under that paradigm,
and it's not just crimes; it's public safety. Like, when I went out with them, what I saw a lot of was their Spice is back, right? So Spice, if you haven't seen this, it's like, I guess it's potpourri, basically.
Unfortunately, I'm familiar with
foundation of it,
family level. So yeah,
I'm sorry. And then they put a synthetic something in there to make it react. So for people who haven't seen it, if somebody takes it, the reaction, they almost look like a person possessed. Like, they're screaming. We came across this woman who was in the park and she was screaming and she had her dress over her head and it was awful. And then a few seconds later, she had come way down and she was sort of rocking back and forth, and I kept thinking she was going to fall over. Somehow she stayed on her feet, and then she was very remorseful. I mean, the whole thing was just devastating to watch. Like, this woman has got to be in emotional pain over all of this.
I thought we had kicked the Spice habit.
It's back, apparently. And so they had to work with her, and she was pregnant, and they ended up taking her in.
She was pregnant?
Yeah. They end up taking her in to check her over and take care of her. But I know that I saw her a few weeks later back out on the street. And then there was another woman who was on something, and she was just wandering into traffic. She was just literally kind of zombified out into traffic. So they have to get that person out of the traffic, speak to them, in a rational way. So, because these people they're not rational people in that moment when they're using drugs, right? So they have to speak to them in a way that calms them, makes them listen to them, react to what they're saying. I mean, the amount of professionalism and patience that I witnessed out there from these officers was amazing. Like, I respect and support our law enforcement, but I had a whole nother level of respect after the night that I spent, because it wasn't just chasing the bad guy. Like, they're really working with the community to help these people.
Right. So that's the community aspect of the local law enforcement.
And there was also a drive-by shooting that we went to, which is the gang-related part that's in here.
I can say in reading the news on a daily basis, the shots fired incidents are increasing.
Even
police chases are increasing. These are things we don't see in New Hampshire, but we're
No,
seeing
and-
them more and more here in Manchester,
Right.
specifically in Manchester.
And, and this was a situation where, it was probably targeted, it was probably gang related. But it was in a very dense area. There were a lot of people living there, and it was a 2 or 3 family home, and they were actually looking for bullets in the siding. So there are people that have nothing to do with this that are living in that home that are in harm's way, and they may not even know it, right? They don't know who's living in their building or around them. And, that was really eye-opening, because you think, well, I'm minding my own business, it's not going to happen to me. But if you're in an area like that, if your neighbor's not doing the right thing, you're at risk. Like that woman that got shot coming out of her home.
Right.
This can't be our new normal. This can't be, well, it's just Manchester and it's acceptable. Like, we need to fight back with everything that we have and get control of our city again. Because like you said, it's happening more and more frequently.
Yeah, and we're not seeing those news stories come out of Nashua. We're not seeing them come out of Concord. We're seeing them come out of Manchester.
Yeah.
So, and like you said, it can't be the new norm.
No.
We have politicians running around, and that's kind of a phrase that's been used frequently. Oh, this is the new norm. We have to expect this because this is who we are.
Or I see our mayor,
President
like
Trump. He reversed that, right?
Yep.
I mean, Obama said, "Hey, this is the new norm: GDP, jobs, etc." And he's able to reverse it. It can be done.
It can be done.
Right.
And I think there are a lot of people that want it to happen, that want to work towards the solution. They're not looking toward the government to do it. They want to be a part of the solution. And that's really the Manchester I know, is the community and the people that want to do the work to fix it.
That's the big thing is maybe it's a generational thing, maybe it's just a liberal thing, is that reliance on government, expecting government to take care of all of our problems when we need to step up.
No, and if you look at current leadership, she's saying everything is great. We've got great momentum. I mean, she said on the news at 5:30 tonight, we've got great momentum in the city. I want 2 more years. And she's not acknowledging the problems that the everyday person is having. I mean, I have people from, all parties coming into my office to say to me, listen, I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, whatever, we need to fix the city. Like, this isn't okay, and City Hall isn't listening. And they've called her and actually, asked for help in certain areas, and she doesn't return the phone call. And, they know that they're frustrated. They know what has to happen, and they don't care about party affiliation. They care about their city.
And we see that when you get politics, when you boil politics down to a state level or a city level, we get that there's more in common amongst that voter base here in Manchester, and so that party line starts to blur because it's all about who can get it done. Right.
And everybody's concerned about their taxes, right?
But
that's universal.
Exactly, taxes, crime. Et cetera. But what happens, and we can come up with example after example here in New Hampshire, and not just in Manchester, in other cities and towns, is that once someone is elected, their focus stops being on what they ran on, what their community wants, and their focus starts to be on what's next.
Yeah, and
how do I get reelected?
Yeah.
What's my next? Do I want to be in this office forever, or am I going to seek a higher office?
Right.
And a lot of politicians start to focus on that, especially in the second half of their term, whether it's a 2-year term, 4-year term, 6-year term for senators.
Yeah, and I honestly, I don't think her heart is in this job anymore. And I think that she's looking at the governor's seat. I think she's trying to work with all the presidential candidates that are coming in one after another because they're courting her for their support, so that she would have that when she runs for the next office.
It's certainly a fun time for visitors nowadays from all sides.
But the people on the street, the people that do all the working and the living and the dying in this community, they don't care about the next presidential candidate coming in to woo her. They care about what's happening. I have friends that live on my end of town. I mean, this is no longer confined to the areas that we think of as the areas you avoid in Manchester. This is everywhere. I had a neighbor on the south side the other night just had some commotion happening outside of their house, and it's happening all over the city, and everyone is concerned about it. Everybody wants change. Everyone wants to find solutions together. And when we're talking about the homeless situation, we have a mayor that just basically said it was okay to override the tax cap. She's never been a fan of it in the past. You know, she's come out and said that. But when the alderman presented a budget that overrode the tax cap, she did not veto it. She didn't do a veto message. She was just like, this is fine with me. Well, when our property taxes increase, the people that are affected the most are people that are on a fixed income, like our elderly, and people that are in apartments that are living like just paycheck to paycheck. Like, that's it. When their apartment, when those property rents go up, when the property taxes go up, that will be passed down to them in their rents, because the apartment owners are in it, you know, it's their business. They're not going to absorb that hit in the increase in property taxes. They need to pass it down to the people that are renting from them. So we're going to see a lot more homeless if we continue this same thing over and over again. I've met people out there that are intense because they are working, and they are literally in between apartments because they do not have first and last month's rent, because it's our average rent right now in the city is almost $1,300 a month. That's $2,600 to get into an apartment if you do first and last month's rent. For some of us, that was our down payment on our house, you know, with an FHA loan.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a lot of money. And the more that we ignore, you know, the main folks that are doing all the working in this city, the more problems like this we're going to have.
All right, so we're going to focus on the city. We're going to focus locally when you're elected here.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, like I said, I live here. I'm raising my children here, and it wasn't that I, you know, thought, oh, my next step is to run for mayor. I was not looking at it, but the city started to become so volatile so quickly. And I just said to my husband, like, I think I can fix this. I think I can bring people together and find the right solutions to do this job. And, you know, I want to live in a city where I can say I'm proud to raise my kids here, and my kids are happy to be here, and I feel that they're safe walking down the street to meet their friends. And right now we don't have that city.
Right. All right. Well, I know our time is almost up, so I'll let you go.
All right. If I can just tell people how to get a hold of me.
Sure.
That'd be it.
Sure.
All right. So Victoria Sullivan, our website is victoriasullivanformayor.com, and you can sign up there to get information about me or to sign up for the campaign. And I just want to leave on a positive note, because we've talked about all the bad things. And I just want people to know there are a lot of people in this city that love this city and want to come together and do the work that it takes to fix it. And I know that we can do it. I know there are solutions. People have great ideas. Some of it's already working, and we bring those people together and we concentrate on the things that are working. I know that we can be a city that's a model to other cities.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. Gary will be back here in his rightful seat next week. I won't. I'll be on a very important trip to Washington, D.C., including a trip to the White House. And then I'll see you back here on September 4th. Gary and I will be back together again. Until then, check out Wilson Hill Pistol Club at the address that's on your screen, and we'll see you next week.